So if you weather the storm, get to the other side of the storm, multifamily always recovers and always recovers higher. Always recovers higher. So the key there is just don't lose the asset, don't lose the property. Make sure you're in a position to maintain that asset, keep it, and weather the storm.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Listen, if you're a big fan of the show, I need you to do one little favor, all right? Leave us a rating or review. It helps us learn more about what you like about the show, but also gives us some real feedback to help it make work harder for your investing goals. And if you haven't done so already, or if this is your first time listening, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Chris Finlay. Hey, Multifamily Insights listeners, if you're looking to invest beyond multifamily, make sure you check out the Invest Beyond Multifamily Conference this fall, Wednesday, October 11th through Friday, October 13th, here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Listen, you're going to learn how to invest in non-residential commercial real estate and master the art of scaling your commercial real estate business. Now, this event is being hosted by Ash Patel, guest on the show, and he's featuring great speakers such as Nate Barger and Joe Fearless. If you want to learn how to invest beyond just multifamily, be sure to check out this event October 11th through the 13th. All you have to do is go to investbeyondmultifamily.com/fall-conference. Again, that's investbeyondmultifamily.com/fall-conference. Chris Finlay is an innovator and leader in today's evolving senior housing and multifamily real estate world. Now, he is the chairman and CEO of Lloyd. Chris works to expand the company's senior housing interests. His extensive real estate experience, development background, and passion for operating first-class senior living facilities help to create an exciting opportunity for both seniors and investors all across the country. Let's welcome to the show, Chris Finlay.
Hey, thank you, John. Great to be on your show.
Hey, Chris, great to have you on. Listen, I went over your bio at a very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Sure. Well, look, we were founded in 1980, and I remind people that the interest rate in 1980 was 19.5%. So if people think we're dealing with high interest rates, there's no comparison, right? So we started out primarily in the services business. We had a commercial brokerage, we had management, we had appraisal, and we built that into one of the largest firms in New England in the Northeast. And then in 1990, we decided to move into development, and then we started developing primarily affordable workforce housing, utilizing the tax credit program, the low-income housing tax credit program. We became one of the top 5 developers in the country, and did that all the way through 2008. And then 2008, obviously, crash came along. Fortunately, we didn't get caught up in that, and so we pivoted from development to investment in multifamily because, after 2008, such a disruption in the market, you could buy existing product for 50 cents on the dollar. So why would you try to build new when you can buy existing at a tremendous price? So we then pivoted from being a developer to being an investor, and that's what we've pretty much done, consistently. And then, we rode that wave, the multifamily wave, from 2010 to 2021, sold most of our multifamily, John, and then pivoted and then reinvested most of that into senior housing. And because we feel that senior housing is just at the start of a similar wave that multifamily went through from 2010 to 2020, so we just think the next 10, 15, 20 years, it'll be an amazing asset class. And it's providing a unique opportunity right now.
Chris, great information. Their background definitely is interesting, man. For the last 40 plus years, you all have been running this business here, investing with all sorts of different things starting out, getting into, really development in the 90s. You talked about getting into multifamily, after the 2008 crash, and more recently pivoting to senior housing. You talked about kind of making that transition from development, where you're building these assets, to investing, where you're buying existing assets. The thing that I've kind of just take away initially is like, you have a really good eye as far as pivoting the strategy, having a top 5 company as far as building those affordable housing, and being able to pivot. Talk to me about the way you look at the market at a high level. Like, how do you look at it to say, what we have been doing has worked fine, but we need to get ready to pivot or do something else? How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, we all of us went through COVID, initially wondering what's going to happen, right? We owned about 8,500 units at that time, and most of our investors are very significant investors. They're either billion-dollar family offices, or they're institutions, New York and Chicago, so forth. So we do what's called joint ventures, where we have one partner per deal, and then we come in on that deal as well. So when COVID hit, John, we nobody knew what would happen, right? And I remember one of our Swiss investors called me, and they just made the announcement that you weren't required to pay rent, right? You can't evict somebody for not paying rent. And you're going to have to pay the mortgage, but and the electric bill and everything else, but they don't have to pay you. So one of my investors called me and said, "Chris, what do you think is going to happen?" And I said, "I have no idea." But fortunately, obviously nobody was doing any buying in those days. So so we took all of our acquisitions people, and I said, "Okay, you're now asset managers, and our entire focus has to be on micromanaging our assets and working with people." And so we implemented policies where we would call every resident and say, "Look, if you need us to work with you, we'll work with you." But it was just that kind of micromanagement. And fortunately, we collected like 85-90% in nearly all of our buildings, which was a miracle. Nobody ever expected that. And so we came out of that COVID situation, and then I think people were so cooped up, and people that had 1, 2, 3, 4 roommates, they wanted to get the heck out of there, get their own place, or at least their own bedroom. You know what I mean? And so there was just this huge demand for multifamily, and rents started just going crazy. And as a result, money that had been on the sidelines through the COVID process now saw what was happening in the multifamily market, and they started buying everything in sight. So cap rates started coming down dramatically. And so when you say pivoting, I try to look for things that are just sort of out of whack. There's like a normal, and then there's crazy, right? And so when you see things that you say, "This is, would I pay that kind of money for this?" and the answer is nowhere near, that's when you have to look at it and say, "All right, what's going on in the market? And is this sort of a unique event and something we need to capitalize on? And then how do we pivot into the next asset class or another asset class that's not so overpriced?" So that's out of COVID, we sold 80% of our multifamily, 21, just unbelievable cap rates. I mean, we just crushed it. We're very, very fortunate. Towards the end of that period, it started correcting. And so about 20% of our portfolio, we weren't able to sell. We still owned and operated. And, obviously, I wish I had sold it then, back then. But, we're fine. And that's where that is. But when you look at something like that, I just said, wow, if it's out of whack, nothing stays crazy forever, right? I mean, you have to look at what's going on in your specific market and marketplace and asset class. And usually when things get overpriced, there's a correction coming. And it's not an if, it's a when. And so, so our policy has always been to try and look at what makes sense, what asset classes make sense, and sort of pivot to, does it make sense to be a developer? Do you want to be an investor? Is the asset class multifamily? Is it senior housing? Is it hotels? Take a look at the various asset classes because they all cycle differently, and just try to make, we just try to buy on the upside. That's all.
What's your process for making that evaluation? Is that like a quarterly review or an annual review, or how typically do you look at that?
Yeah, good question. I think it's a monthly review. I mean, we're looking at all of our assets on a monthly basis. We review them all on a monthly basis. And I think on a big picture situation, you're just looking at where are you facing challenges? Where are things going in the wrong direction? And then where might there be an opportunity where things are moving in the right direction? Or how do you position yourself to be in a position to take advantage? For example, multifamily right now, we all know is going through somewhat of a tough time, especially if you had a floating rate loan and you didn't have a cap. There's a lot of stress out there on the market for those types of deals. They'll hopefully make it, but you have to look at that and you have to say, okay, where is that going? What's the opportunity there? And there may be an opportunity for rescue capital or whatever. So to answer your question, I think you look at your portfolio on a monthly basis and you try to make a decision. Is this going in the right direction? Is it going in the wrong direction? If it's going in the wrong direction, what am I going to do to, help solve it? And is it something that I just weather the storm and hang in there? It always comes back, right? Always comes back. So if you weather the storm, get to the other side of the storm, multifamily always recovers and always recovers higher. Always recovers higher. So the key there is just don't lose the asset, don't lose the property. Make sure you're in a position to maintain that asset and keep it and weather the storm.
Chris, I love what you just said there because I think it may be oversimplifying it to some people, but I think it's true, right? The goal is just don't lose the asset.
Right.
If you can weather that storm, if you can make those monthly payments, if you can get through the tough times, multifamily tends to do well and tends to go up in value over the long term. I think where people get in trouble is if you're trying to time the market or you really got to sell in 6 months or a year, that's where it could get a little tight. So, and that's one of the things that attracted me to the asset class in the first place. I remember I was doing some flip projects and they were just terrible because the moment you go over either budget or over your timeline, well, now the profits are dwindling and you get to a point where it's now you're at zero profits and you're just trying to, salvage the project as much as you can. Yeah. Versus with multifamily, again, the price, a quote that I heard, I just love is the price of multifamily only really matters on 2 days, right? It's the day you buy it and the day you sell it. And if you already bought the property, you control, if you can control that second day, the day you sell it, then you have a great chance of making profits, but you got to make sure you can control that. So really good insights there. Hey, last question on multifamily, because I know it sounds like you kind of more recently pivoted into the senior housing, still have maybe 20% of the portfolio in multifamily. But my guess is from what I'm hearing you say is that you're definitely open to acquiring more multifamily when that market maybe shifts or becomes more advantageous. What do you see? And obviously you don't have a crystal ball, but like timeline wise, are we talking, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, or how do you plan on approaching kind of that time frame and keeping an eye on multifamily and maybe getting back into the acquisition side?
Yeah, I think multi has got probably another minimum 12 to 18 months of rough sailing, right? I think, look, interest rates, we all hope that the Fed would sort of put a pause or start reducing rates by now. I was certainly one of those that thought it would. the economy has been so resilient, employment has been so resilient that as much as the Fed tries to squeeze us, we're doing better. So until things get worse, the Fed is pretty much going to have to continue to apply pressure. And they mentioned, oh, maybe one or two more hikes, but who knows? I mean, I just read an article this morning where Jamie Dimon was saying, what would happen if rates go to 7.5? We're at 5.5. What if it goes to 7.5? I mean, so look, I think we're in for a challenging time for the next 12 to 18 months. And I think once the interest rates hit a peak and everybody is convinced that, okay, we've seen the top, now it's a matter of it's coming down. Now, how fast it comes down, and is it going to get back to 1% and 2% interest rates for us? No, I don't think that's happening for a while. But 3% sounds pretty good right now. So I think it'll start coming back, and as it starts coming back, I think there's going to be a huge amount of money on the sidelines that are going to want to jump in and make investments, because you think about it, you can do a floating rate loan and float it down, right? So you may start out on that loan and say it's SOFR plus 400 or whatever, and now as SOFR comes down, that rate keeps coming down as well with it, and you ride the rate down. So I think there's going to be a lot of capital that's going to take that somewhat risk or strategy and jump in and try and get great buys, and we're going to think they're paying too much, but in a couple of years we're going to realize that hey, they got some good deals.
Yeah, that's really good insight. I appreciate your foresight there on that. Let's talk about kind of that transition you focused on, right? Getting into senior housing. What sparked you to get into senior housing?
Well, we've been in senior housing for a long time. We developed and owned a number of 55 plus communities, which is, active adult. And then about 25 years ago, I built what was then the first affordable independent and assisted living facility in New Hampshire. We still own and operate it. And so when I did that first one about 25 years ago, I thought, wow, it was very successful, filled up, margins on it were terrific. And I thought, hey, this is for me. And I was looking at other sites to develop and buy and so forth, and then the market crashed. So the senior housing segment of the population for assisted and memory care, it's a tiny percentage. You're dealing with a 2 or 3% of the demographic in your market. So it's a tiny percentage of people that can qualify to spend the money and live in one of these properties. So it's a very thin market. And in the past, boom, you do okay, bust, you're done. Now what I see happening, John, is the demographics for seniors is just so overwhelming. I mean, there's 10,000 people turn 65 every day in America. The baby boom generation, I'm one of them. 75 million baby boomers are heading down the pike. Now I'm one of the first in the line there, and the initial stage of the baby boomers are in the 75, 70, 77 range. When you hit that 80 number, that's when senior housing really starts being impacted. So I think in the next 2-3 years tops, demographically, we are going to have a surge of demand. And there's simply been no supply created in the last 5 years. A lot of properties have been shut down and repurposed or repositioned. So there's like the tsunami coming, right? I mean, it's going to be a situation, I think, where it could reach almost emergency
Mm.
situation where the government will have to get involved and start, doing something to provide these kinds of facilities for the senior population, because they're going to need them. So it's like it's I've been watching it for a long time, but now this baby boomer, when this baby boomer started, that baby boomer generation hits 80, look out.
Yeah.
It's just like a tsunami coming behind it.
And Chris, I know a lot of our listeners may not be as familiar with some of the nuances of the term, right? When we talk about senior housing versus assisted facilities, or retirement homes, retirement communities. Can you just give us a little bit of a kind of a rundown of what actually exists there, and maybe some of the differences between those things?
Sure, absolutely. So you start out with just an age-restricted multifamily apartment, and that's what's called the 55 plus. And let me just say, that's a phenomenal asset class. I mean, it takes longer for those properties to lease up, but once they lease up, those folks, average length of stay in a 55 plus is 8.5 years.
Oh.
So they never leave. And furthermore, John, when they leave, the unit is in better shape than when they moved in, chances are, because those folks take care of things,
Yeah.
So it's
no wild parties.
Huh?
No wild parties at these units.
Exactly. Well, maybe we're all parties, but they don't break things, So,
no keg stands.
But they're just a great tenant base, and you fill them up, they stay full. It's probably, if you were to look at multifamily and include the 55 plus into multifamily, it beats all the others from a stability income point of view, and it's just a great asset class. The step above that is called active adult, and same thing, except you start providing some extra services within the community. So you have happy hours, you have various activities and exercise and yoga classes and movie night and all of that stuff. So there's a little extra cost. Building them it means you have a larger community room, a larger activities room, those sort of things. So you have more common area in the active adult. And because of that, they have proven that they've been able to get a higher rent than just a pure multifamily. So if you were to take just a pure 55 plus with none of that, the active adult looks to price on a square footage basis at least 20% over your standard 55. So you get paid a premium for that. And it's really here again, it's slower in leasing up, John, but once you get that thing leased up, you're in absolutely great shape, because here again, if you take care of them, they almost never leave. And that's a great asset class. So then you go from active adult into what's called independent living. Independent living is like a full service hotel, basically, except you have a full apartment, you have a full kitchen. You basically are someone that is completely mobile and independent. In other words, it's not that you have any health issues and so forth, and you just want to live in a community where you're around other people and there's services available for you. So the meals are prepared for you, you have housekeeping, you have activities, you have transportation, concierge services, all of that kind of stuff is provided for you. And it's like carefree living, right? You don't have a medical need, but you just don't want to have to cook dinner every night or worry about this and what happens when I go visit my family or whatever. So independent is the next category up from active adult. More expensive, of course, because you're providing the meals and so forth. So it's very much a choice product, and it's really geared to the more affluent. So now what's happening in the business is the active adult is like almost the affordable version of an independent living, right? You're not getting all the benefits, but you're getting some of them here at a much lower cost than at an independent living. So independent living is fairly expensive. It's carefree living. They don't have to worry about anything. And it's really geared to sort of the higher income type person. And it's becoming very, very popular as well. So that's independent. Now, when you need care and you need some help with eating or walking or transportation or dressing or medication management and stuff like that, then you move into what's called assisted living. And that's basically assisting someone in their daily needs. It's not a medical situation like a skilled nursing facility. It's you're assisting somebody live that needs some help. They may be in a wheelchair, so you're going to help them get in the wheelchair. You're going to maybe, push the wheelchair for them or whatever. There's people that would have, because of certain things, maybe a hard time eating by themselves, right? So you would assist them in eating and dressing and getting a shower, whatever. So those kinds of things, that's assisted living. That's the area that I'm sort of focused on right now. I think that's the area where there's going to be a huge demand, and people are and that segment of the business, John, is it's called needs-based, and that means when you need those services, you've got to get them, and either a family member does it or you go to an assisted living. And we all know family members, even though they'd love to take care of their family, they're working, they may be living California, mom's in Michigan. I mean, it's very hard on a lot of families to provide that kind of service and do it at home. So, and then even then, if they do it at home, how many people are around mom during the day? Is she by herself, or so the assisted living is proven to be very, very successful, very positive towards giving people social interaction and being around other people, and then caring for them in those services components so that so that they can live very comfortably and they're there. And then of course memory care is dementia, Alzheimer's, tragic disease, and those are secured environments where because a lot of people in that category like to wander, so you got to make sure they can't leave the facility or whatever, and those wings and so forth are specifically designed and tailored to encourage those people some activity and interaction and so forth. And that's a tough thing. I mean, that's when you see people with dementia, Alzheimer's. As you know, there's no cure for it. It's just it's just a situation where you try to manage it as comfortably as possible, and do that. So.
Yeah. Chris, I appreciate you sharing that breakdown, right? So just to recap that, you've got your 55 plus communities, you have your active adult communities, which is where you're going to have, yoga classes and movie nights and things like that. You have your independent living. This is going to be more luxury. This is where it's more of a hotel type environment where the meals are prepared, transportation is provided, all those kind of things. And then assisted living is where you're focused, where you're going to have people who need a little bit of assistance, getting into wheelchairs, taking their medication, things of that nature.
Right.
And then finally, we have our memory care. So let's lock in on assisted living. When you look at this opportunity, you talked about kind of the metrics, right? How many people are going to be turning 80 plus over the next few years? 10,000 people are turning 65 every year in the United States. So there's certainly going to be a growing demand in this space. Are you looking at these from a development standpoint? And if so, how are you identifying where you want to develop for these assisted living facilities?
Yeah, so what's happened in that specific segment, John, is that, with COVID, so all of these properties were doing pretty good until COVID came along. And COVID really decimated this industry. It did far more harm to the skilled nursing facilities than it did assisted and memory care. But nevertheless, was very, very tough on these properties. So if you had a property that was successful, say 85 or 90%, a lot of states wouldn't let, when somebody left, they wouldn't let you put anybody else new into the property. So your occupancy goes down, every week, so to speak. And you could have been the best operator in the world. This was sort of a black swan type event that it impacted this industry probably more than any other industry. I mean, hotels were certainly impacted similarly, and restaurants, of course, but this specific industry got clobbered. And so coming out of it, there's just such a huge opportunity to buy existing properties. So there's sort of two strategies here, which we like a lot. You have the new properties that were built in 19 and 20, and they were in lease up just before COVID hit. And, here you are, you got a brand new, really nice facility. You're starting to lease. You get to 30, you get to 50, you get to 70%, and then bang, COVID hits. And now you go from 70 back down to 30. And so coming out of COVID, and the unique difference between this asset class and multifamily is your cost structure in assisted living is huge. Okay, I mean, you've got, if you have a 100-unit facility, you've got 60 employees. I mean, so just from an operating point of view, you could be losing $100,000 a month. I mean, many of these things we look at, they have a negative cash flow of over $1 million a year. How many people can hang on? I mean, you just can't hang on to that. So what's happened is there's an opportunity now to buy these brand new assets, and let's face it, they're built. They've gone through all the approvals, they've gone through all the construction, they're up, they're running, and they may be at 30, 50% occupancy. Our job is to buy them at a very good number and then fill them up. And so rather than develop new, it's very, very hard right now, I think, to find, it would have to be a very unique situation where it made sense to build a new facility versus buying, one of these assets that were built in 19 or 20, suffered through COVID, and now you're buying the assets already built. You're really sort of buying it in lease up, right? Yeah. And so you buy it, you lease it up, and we're seeing opportunities there to buy assets at anything from 60, 70% of replacement.
Chris, when you're looking at, oh, sorry, I was just saying, when you're looking at something like that, obviously that's a pretty specific, criteria, right? If you're looking at something that was built in the last couple of years, right. Assisted living facilities. So I'm assuming you're looking nationwide. Are there any other metrics or criteria that you're using to help identify or kind of select which properties you're looking at?
Yeah, no, look, it has to be in a good market. I mean, demographics are very important. So in this, like, as I said before, it's a very thin portion of the population that utilizes this, right? So your demographics, but chances are whoever built these in 19 or 20 did the demographic studies, and then here again, chances are there's been a buildup in demand because population of that age has grown and there's nowhere for them to go, right? They've been holding off. Who wanted to put mom in there during COVID? No one would do that, right? So even though it was tough taking care of mom, they kept mom at home. Now they need to put mom into one of these properties. So I think it just from a selection of criteria, I think we try to go for the best markets. And we take a look at the demand factors there. And then you have to put together basically a new lease up schedule, because as I mentioned before, these things will eat you alive if you don't get it to a break-even number very quickly. So, so we do the studies, do the market studies, and we just see some great opportunities. And then our other strategy, John, is to do what's typical in the multi arena, and that's your value add, asset, where we basically buy a 2000 vintage asset. They haven't put any money in it for 20 years. It needs a whole new refresh. It needs technology. It needs all that stuff. And needless to say, the folks that have gone through COVID and so forth they're out of money. I mean, they're just not in a position to do that. So we can come along, buy a great asset at 50% or less than replacement, and do our value add component and end up with a very nice asset that's good for the next 20 years. So great
Chris, I think you're hitting on just a couple of great ideas here, right? One is that this was a segment that was really clobbered by COVID due to the restrictions and not really being able to bring in new residents there. So there's ripe opportunity, especially with interest rates shooting up. There might be some ripe opportunities there for new investors. You all are taking a look at that and finding opportunities today. So it's something that we should all be thinking about. And I'll just say from a high level standpoint, think about where there's opportunity, where you can be advantageous of that, but come in with that value add strategy and create value for yourself, or that lease up strategy. And that makes a lot of sense for people to come in and look at those two angles and say, hey, is this a lease up play? Is this a value add play? I think the main takeaway is you always want to have a way to create value, right? You're not just buying something and doing whatever the previous owners are doing. You're coming in and you have a very clear vision of how you're going to create value for yourself and your investors. And for folks who want to learn more about you, they can reach out at Chris at LloydJonesLLC.com. That's the email address. We'll make sure we link to that in our show notes. Right now, we're going to move on to our round of insights. Are you ready?
Sure.
They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button today. All right, Chris, give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Oh, wow. Well, back in our development deals, we did a bunch of historic renovations, which were certified by the federal government as certified historic, and we got historic tax credits for doing some of this. So we had this school and beautiful old school building, and inside the school was an auditorium. Right, it was a high school, former high school, had a big auditorium. And so our thought was, we remove all the chairs and so forth, and then the platforms, we put a floor in there and we create about eight more apartments. So pretty simple. So the historic people, John, came in and said, no, you can't do this. This has to be preserved. I said, what are you talking about? It's, no one's using it. I mean, it's, anyway, short story is, they made us preserve it. We had to close it in. Now the project's 8 units short. Now I got to rewrite all my numbers. So, did it make it? Yes. I mean, the lesson here is we've done a number of historic, renovations and redevelopments. And you always feel great about doing a historic renovation. I mean, chances are they're beautiful buildings to begin with. They're just gorgeous, and there's a lot of feel good about it. But your chances of losing money on one of those is about 100%. So every darn one I did, I think I lost money on. So, so you find these quirks where, and you just can't do enough due diligence on a senior property to catch every one of these things, So I think the answer to that question was, very, 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 very hard to, assess all the risk involved in some of these development projects.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, love that you figured out the solution there, but understanding that dealing with those historic projects can be a challenge. All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
I think from you mean as far as information resources?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, how you communicate with the team or a resource, or, just getting information, data, things like that.
Yeah, I think I tell people that all of the major brokerage firms produce so much data and information and market information that it's beyond belief. And so if you can go to each one of their sites, sign up for your market area, free, you're going to get just tremendous information. And it just amazes me every time I see it that, look, that stuff is expensive to produce, and it's expensive to have the researchers and analysts getting all that data, and then they put it out there for free. So I think from a point of view of free, great information, all of the major brokerage firms put out whatever asset class it is, right? I mean, they just put out a tremendous amount of information on that. So that's that. And then obviously there's CoStar. In the senior space, there's NIC, which is, National Investment Center for Seniors. They have their own database for senior properties and senior demographics and so forth. So that's pretty much it. But I think for the smaller investor, take advantage of what these big firms are putting out there for no cost at all. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
I just finished a book that was a fabulous book. It's called, I wrote it down here, Billionaires Row. And it's written by Catherine Clark, who's a writer for the Wall Street Journal. She used to write for The Real Deal. So Billionaires Row, John, is that strip in front of Central Park where they built all of these huge towers that are really thin, right? They're like pencils going up 1,500 feet into the sky. And they were just super, super expensive. These things were selling for $7,000, $8,000 a foot. So amazing. And the story that she writes in this book is about the developers that put these deals together. And she obviously had access and did a tremendous amount of research about behind the scenes what was going on, because you had to do, assemblages of all of these parcels of land in order to get them big enough to pop one of these on, right? And so it's a fabulous read. And then it's also a great read because it sort of tells you how these developers put together that capital stack. So think about it, when you got a project, these projects were $2 and $3 billion projects, billion-dollar projects. So all the different levels of debt and pref equity and mezzanine and, it was just incredible. And the distances they would go to find that capital. I mean, they were going all over the world, Japan, China, Saudi Arabia, London, you name it. I mean, it was like, you talk about, scrambling to get capital to do your deal. This is on a whole new scale. So I just thought it was a really, really good read, really interesting to see the most sophisticated top developers in the world and what they go through, the challenges they face. So, if you're a little guy like me, I mean, you realize, hey, even those big guys have challenges, right? So it's a great read. Good read.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
What's that?
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
Yeah, daily habit for me is I get up very early. So I'm usually up around 4:30, and I spend the first hour. So I wouldn't say meditating, but thinking about what goals I have, what have I accomplished, what do I need to get done this day, and so forth, and sort of, take some time to pray and really sort of plan the day, and then I go exercise and have breakfast, and then basically 8 o'clock I'm full blast until 6. But getting up early, I think, is for me very beneficial because it's quiet, nobody else is up. I can really sort of think and meditate and be at peace.
All right. Give me your number one insight for investing in senior housing, and I'm going to say specifically for assisted living.
Number one insight, I would say, look, it's a very operational business, far more so than multifamily. So look, if you're an average person, you can go manage a multifamily. I could go manage a multifamily. But let me tell you, neither one of us could go manage an assisted living. So the challenge there is you have to have an operating platform or have to partner with an operating platform because it's more of an operating business than it is just a pure real estate investment. The real estate's important, but way more important is how you operate that property and how you manage it. It's a business, it's an operating business. So it's very unique in that sense. I tell people it's 80% operations, 20% real estate. Multifamily, I would say, is 80% real estate and 20% operations.
Yeah, very helpful. Appreciate that. All right, let's lighten the mood a little bit. You are in Dallas, used to be in Miami, but now in Dallas. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Terry Black's. So Terry Black's is a barbecue place, and it's some of the best barbecue you'd ever have.
I love it. Well, make sure we put that one on the list there.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you come to Dallas, you got to go to Terry Black's.
All right. Chris, you gave us a lot of great information, man. I appreciate, one, your perspective on being investing for over 40 years, talking about where the interest rates are today. We still got some room before we start talking about those 1980 interest rates, but hopefully we don't get anywhere close to that. But also just the way you've been able to pivot the business, taking a look at where the market is and just, taking inventory, looking at it once a month and just saying, hey, does this still make sense? What's the trajectory that we're heading into, and should we pivot? That ultimately led to a pivot into development, finally a pivot into acquiring existing multifamily assets, and then refocusing or putting more emphasis on senior housing and investing in assisted living facilities. Talking about, what's going on in assisted living, just understanding that, hey, we have there's this tsunami that's coming where so many people are turning 65 every year. Some people are going to turn 80 and they need that housing support. So now is a great time and a great opportunity to get involved and to find solutions for these individuals, which is exactly what you are doing. For folks that want to learn more about these opportunities, they can connect with you directly at your email, chris@lloydjonesllc.com. We'll make sure we link to that in our show notes. But Chris, I just want to thank you again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you and hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Really enjoyed it.